Hi everyone, I'm Chris and this is my story. I'm 25 and I've been in a relationship with my girlfriend Emma for almost 7 years now. We met in community college where we became close friends. After 2 years of being friends, we started dating and everything seemed to be falling into place. At the time, Emma had dreams of becoming a nurse. I always admired her ambition and I supported her goals fully. It was something that brought us closer together. When I transferred to a 4-year university to earn my MBA, Emma was there for me every step of the way, emotionally supporting me while I focused on my studies. I appreciated it more than she'll ever know. Around the same time, Emma's parents cut her off financially. She had developed a pretty bad habit of overspending, and her parents couldn't afford to keep supporting her. This led Emma to take a year off to work and get her bills in order. I was deep into my own academic journey, but I always kept in touch with her, and we made it work. During all this time, I was also building a startup business in the automotive industry with my best friend. I poured all my energy, time, and savings into it. But earlier this year, we were bought out for a life-changing sum of money. It wasn't just the money that changed things. We were both offered lucrative consulting roles with a high-paying salary, which I accepted. Emma had continued to work at a jewelry store throughout the years, even when things were tough. But after the buyout, everything took a turn. One day, Emma told me that she was putting in her 2-week notice. She said she was ready to quit her job and focus on other things. I offered to pay for her education and her expenses if she decided to go back to school. She seemed excited. In the meantime, I bought us a condo, an upgrade from our tiny apartment, close to Emma's school, thinking we could both start fresh. We were planning for the future, and everything seemed to be on track. But then, things started to feel different. One weekend, while we were talking about her future, Emma casually mentioned that she wasn't sure she wanted to go back to school. She said she could be a stay-at-home wife instead. We weren't married, but I was shocked by her words. I didn't know how to respond. After all, one of the things that attracted me to Emma in the first place was her ambition. It just didn't make matters worse. I noticed her spending habits were getting out of hand. She started shopping more frequently and was looking at new cars. Maybe I was overreacting, but something just didn't feel right. I still love her, and I want us to make it work, but I can't shake the feeling that something's changed in her. It feels like the money has completely shifted her priorities, and it's hard for me to process. That's where I'm at. I'm not sure what to do next. Should I confront her about how I'm feeling? How do I explain to her that this version of her isn't the woman I fell in love with? Community response. I'm sure a lot of you have been in similar situations or have advice to offer. It feels like a pretty difficult conversation to have, but I think it's necessary. A lot of people are telling me that I need to sit down with Emma and have a serious discussion about our future. I agree. I need to be clear about my expectations and see if she's still on the same page. If we want different things out of life, we'll have to find some kind of compromise. The problem is, I don't know if she's capable of seeing things from my perspective. I also know that she has a different view of what a relationship should be since her mom was a stay-at-home mom. I wonder if she sees this as a natural next step in her life. Growing up, Emma always said she wanted to be the opposite of her mom, to be independent and have her own career. But now, she seems to be heading in a completely different direction. I don't know where we go from here, but I know I need to get some clarity, even if it's hard to confront. Thanks for reading. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. After that weekend when Emma dropped the bomb about possibly wanting to be a stay-at-home wife, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I spent days just mulling over everything. I'm not going to lie. It was hard to keep my cool. Everything I'd been working towards, my career, my future, felt like it was slipping through my fingers. I was so used to Emma being this strong, independent woman who had big dreams, and now, suddenly, she wasn't sure if she even wanted to keep going after them. I kept telling myself, maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe she's just feeling overwhelmed. Or maybe she just needs time to figure things out. But deep down, I knew something was off. Money was supposed to make life easier, not complicated. Yet here I was, stuck in this weird situation where it felt like everything was changing and not in a good way. Finally, after days of avoiding the conversation, I decided I had to talk to her. I couldn't just keep ignoring the elephant in the room. I needed clarity. And if I was being honest with myself, so was she. So, Thursday night, I sat her down in the living room. I had been thinking about what I was going to say, but Nothing prepared me for how this conversation would actually unfold. Emma, I started, trying to keep my voice steady. We need to talk about what's next. We've got some big decisions ahead, and I need to know where your head is at. She looked at me like she already knew what was coming. There was a slight tension in her shoulders, like she'd been expecting this. I told her I wanted her to make a decision, whether that meant finding a job, going back to school, or coming up with another plan. I wasn't trying to pressure her, but I was clear. I needed her to be as committed to her future as I was to mine. That's when things went south. She immediately got defensive. Her face turned red, and I could see the anger building behind her eyes. "You don't get it, do you?" she snapped. "I'm the reason you're in the position you are right now. I supported you through everything, your school, your startup, everything, and now you're telling me I have to go back to school or get a job. You owe me this." I was stunned. I didn't know how to react. She was always calm, collected, and level-headed. This wasn't the woman I knew. She continued, her voice shaking with emotion. "I wasted 5 years of my life with you. I could have been married. I could have had a family by now, but I supported you instead. And now you're telling me to go back to school and work?" I tried to stay calm, but the words hit me like a punch in the gut. I didn't know how to respond at first. Was she really angry at me for giving her the freedom to decide what she wanted to do next? Or was this something deeper? I told her that I came from a middle-class family where both my parents worked hard to provide for us, and that's what I expected in a relationship. I didn't come from a family where someone was just handed everything. I loved Emma, but I didn't love the person she was becoming. She wasn't the same woman I fell for, and it was clear to me now, money had changed everything. By the end of the conversation, I couldn't even recognize her. It wasn't just her attitude. It was the way she was acting, as if everything I had, everything I worked for, was hers for the taking. I realized that I couldn't just sit by and watch her throw away everything she had worked for. She was better than this, and I knew I couldn't let her take me down this path. I told her I needed a break, that I'd be away on a business trip, but that when I came back, I wanted things to be sorted out. It wasn't easy, but I said it. "When I get back on Tuesday, I need all your things out of the condo. I'm not going to live like this anymore." I didn't even wait for her to respond. I just left. I didn't want to be there when everything finally exploded. I felt like I was losing everything all at once. The condo, the money, Emma, and maybe even myself. But I knew that if I stayed, I'd just keep trying to fix something that couldn't be fixed. I couldn't live in this toxic, materialistic version of her that had taken over. The next few days were some of the longest I've ever experienced. I couldn't escape the guilt. I kept asking myself if I'd done the right thing, but deep down, I knew I had. I wasn't doing this to hurt her. I was doing it because I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. Then came the calls. Her sister called me multiple times, but I ignored them. I wasn't in the mood to talk. I didn't want to hear any more excuses or try to justify what had happened. But I gave in eventually, and I answered. Her sister told me Emma had been crying all day and wanted to work things out. I didn't know how to respond. Honestly, I didn't want to talk about it anymore. Her best friend even called me, asking if we could meet up. She said she had something to show me that had been keeping her up at night. I didn't even know what to think anymore. Did I even want to know? I was already dealing with enough, and I didn't think anything else would change the situation. All I wanted was peace. But it felt like I couldn't escape the drama. I didn't care anymore. I wasn't going to meet with them, and I wasn't going to change my mind. When I returned, I would put the condo back on the market. I just couldn't keep living like this. Reflecting on everything, I kept thinking about how things had gotten so out of hand. I had been willing to help Emma, to support her dreams, to build a future together. But it was clear to me now that she was no longer the person I thought I knew. And I wasn't sure if we could ever go back to the way things were. I didn't want to think about Emma or her family anymore. I didn't want to think about her running to me when things went wrong. I had to move on, for my own sake. I wasn't going to let this consume me. After that night, things only got harder. I was going through the motions of my everyday life, but my mind kept drifting back to Emma. I couldn't escape it. Every decision I made felt like it was tied to her. Whether it was getting up for work, taking calls, or planning out the next steps for my career, it all felt empty. Emma was always there before, supporting me and helping me keep my head straight. But now, everything felt off. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the change in who she was and who I was becoming because of it. The condo was a constant reminder of what I had tried to build for us, a new chapter for both of us. But now, it felt like a burden. I didn't want it anymore. I didn't want anything that tied me to a version of Emma who was no longer the woman I knew. The woman who used to be driven and passionate about her future was now gone, replaced by someone I hardly recognized. I kept thinking about that conversation. Her words echoed in my mind. I've wasted 5 years of my life with you. The more I thought about it, the more it gnawed at me. Was she right? Had I been the one holding her back all along? Or was this just her way of justifying something that didn't feel right to her? But then I remembered, she was the one who wanted independence. She was the one who had dreamed of being a nurse and of having a career. I was just the guy who supported her. But now, it seemed like I wasn't the one she needed anymore. I was just the paycheck, and that realization hurt more than I could explain. The calls didn't stop. Every day there was a message from either her sister, her best friend, or even Emma herself asking me to reconsider, to come back, to talk things through. But I didn't want to talk. I wanted clarity, and every conversation just felt like more noise. Emma had made her decision, and I needed to stick with mine. Then came the moment I'd been dreading. When I finally went back to the condo, I had already made up my mind that I wasn't going to tolerate her behavior anymore. I wasn't going to let her convince me that this was just a phase or that everything would magically go back to the way it was. She had shown me who she was, and now I had to decide whether I could live with that. When I walked into the condo, everything felt different. It didn't feel like home anymore. The place that had once symbolized the start of something new now felt like a tomb of broken promises. I didn't want to feel like this. I wanted the life we'd talked about. I wanted the future we'd planned. But it was clear now that I couldn't get there with Emma. I had to do it. I went straight to the living room where I found Emma sitting, her eyes red from crying. She looked at me, almost pleading, like she was waiting for me to change my mind. But I couldn't. I had made my decision, Emma. I can't do this anymore. This isn't the life I want. I'm sorry, but we've grown apart. ... Her face fell. She didn't say anything for a moment. She just stared at me like she was trying to process the words that had just come out of my mouth. I could see the anger and hurt building behind her eyes. "You're really doing this, aren't you?" she asked, her voice shaking. I nodded. "I have to. I can't keep pretending everything is okay when it's not. ... For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my own life again. I didn't feel trapped. I didn't feel guilty for wanting more, for wanting a partner who shared my values and my goals. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about who we were as individuals and whether we could still be the people we were when we first met. And clearly we couldn't. The rest of the day was a blur. Emma left, taking all her things with her. I didn't say anything else to her. What was there left to say? The relationship we had was over, and in that moment I felt a strange sense of relief. The next few days were a whirlwind. I couldn't focus at work. I couldn't think about anything except what had just happened. Emma's sister called me again, but I didn't answer. Her friends tried to reach out, but I was done. I didn't want to keep talking about the past. It was over, and it was time for me to move on. But as much as I tried to move forward, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was all my fault. Maybe I had been more patient with Emma. Maybe if I had handled things differently. But then I remembered the conversations we'd had, the arguments, the way she'd changed, the way she'd become someone I didn't recognize. And I realized that I had made the right decision. It wasn't about being a millionaire. It wasn't about the money. It was about being true to myself and not settling for something that didn't feel right. I took the condo off the market and I started looking for a new place. I didn't want to be reminded of what we had. I wanted to start fresh. I wanted to move on. I didn't want to date anyone right away. I needed time to heal, to reflect, to figure out who I was without Emma in my life. But the one thing I did know, I wasn't going to let anyone change me. I wasn't going to let anyone make me feel guilty for wanting a life that made me happy. Emma had made her choices, and I had to make mine. And as painful as it was, I knew I'd be okay. After the dust settled from the breakup, things started to feel quieter. For a few days, I felt like I was just floating through life. I wasn't sure what to focus on first, whether it was work, my personal life, or just figuring out what the hell happened to me and Emma. I had spent so much time trying to make everything work, trying to be the partner she needed. But somewhere along the way, I lost myself in the process. And maybe she had too. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel the weight of the situation. The guilt still crept in at the most random times, usually late at night when I was alone with my thoughts. I missed the old Emma, the one who was ambitious, driven, and who had dreams bigger than just the life I could provide for her. But the reality was that the woman who stood in front of me that night wasn't her anymore. She had changed, and I had changed too. Work was a good distraction. The consulting job I had taken after the buyout kept me busy, but it wasn't enough to keep my mind from wandering. I found myself scrolling through old pictures of me and Emma, remembering the good times, the vacations, and the simple nights when we used to stay up late talking about the future. It felt like a lifetime ago. Then one day, I got the call that I had been dreading. Her best friend Sarah reached out again. This time, I wasn't going to ignore it. I picked up the phone, and before I even said hello, Sarah jumped right in. "Chris," she said. "Emma's been a mess. She's been calling me every day, crying and talking about how much she regrets everything. She wants to fix things with you. She wants to try again." I didn't know how to respond at first. Part of me wanted to hear her out. But then I remembered the way she had been acting before and the things she had said to me. It wasn't just about one argument or one bad day. It was about the shift in who she had become, and I wasn't sure if I could undo that. "I don't think I can go back to that," I said, my voice steady. "I can't just pretend like nothing happened. It's not about her being sorry, it's about what happened between us. I don't think she realizes how much this has changed me." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "I get it," she said softly. "I just think you deserve closure. Emma does too. I know she's not perfect, and I know she messed up, but she wants to make it right. I think you both need to talk." I didn't know if I was ready for that kind of conversation, but Sarah was right about one thing. I needed closure. I couldn't keep running from it, from Emma, or from the version of her that was still stuck in my mind. I needed to know if we could end this on some kind of peaceful note, or if I was really ready to walk away from it all. "All right," I said finally. "I'll meet with her. But it has to be on my terms, no drama. Just closure." That's how I found myself standing in front of her apartment a few days later, my heart pounding in my chest. I hadn't seen Emma since that night when we ended everything. It felt like a lifetime ago, but here we were, about to face each other again. She opened the door, looking nothing like the confident, ambitious woman I once knew. Her hair was messy, her eyes red from crying, and she looked so much smaller than I remembered. The guilt hit me again, but I swallowed it down. "Chris," she whispered, stepping aside to let me in. "Thank you for agreeing to talk." I didn't say anything at first. I just walked inside, letting the silence fill the space between us. It was awkward, to say the least. I could feel the weight of the past few weeks in the air, the tension, the unresolved emotions. We sat down on the couch, and for a long time, neither of us said a word. Finally, Emma spoke. I quote, "We've been thinking about everything we talked about," she said, her voice shaky. And I realize now that I've been acting completely out of character. I don't know what happened to me. I didn't recognize myself, and I hurt you. I'm sorry. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to hear her say that everything would be different, that we could go back to the way we were. But deep down, I knew it was too late for that. "Emma," I said slowly. "I can't go back to the way things were. I've thought about this a lot, and I've realized something important. The person I was when we first met isn't the person I am now. And maybe you're not the same person either. I don't think we can just erase everything that happened. I don't think we can pretend it didn't change us." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I get it. I've changed. I don't want to lose you, Chris. But I understand if you can't forgive me. I messed up. I was selfish. And I didn't think about how my decisions were affecting us." I was quiet for a moment, trying to find the right words. I didn't want to be cruel, but I also didn't want to leave things unresolved. I still care about you, Emma, but I don't know if we can ever go back to what we had. I've been thinking about my future, and I've realized that I need someone who shares my vision, someone who can be my partner, not just someone who relies on me. I'm sorry, but it's over, Dot. She broke down, sobbing. I felt terrible, but I also knew that this was the right thing. I couldn't keep living in the past. We both needed to move forward, separate from each other. I stayed for a little longer just to make sure she was okay. But it was clear that we had both made our peace, even if it wasn't the kind of peace we had hoped for. It was painful, but it was necessary. When I left her apartment, I felt a strange sense of relief. I had closure. The chapter was finally closed. I had made the decision to move on, and now I was ready to build a new future for myself, one that wasn't tied to the past, to Emma, or to the life we tried to build together. I knew there would be more bumps along the way, there always are. But I was ready. I had learned something important through all of this. Money doesn't change who you are, but it can show you who people really are. And I had learned that I needed someone who valued me for who I was, not just for what I could give them. It was time for me to move on, to rebuild, and to make my future what I wanted it to be. It's been a few months since that final conversation with Emma, and honestly, I'm doing better than I expected. It wasn't easy at first. The pain of walking away, of seeing everything I thought I was building with someone crumble, stuck with me for a while. But over time, I've realized that sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that lead to the most growth. At first, I wasn't sure what my life was going to look like after all this. I mean, I'd been with Emma for 7 years. We'd built a life together, or at least that's what I thought. The hardest part was letting go of the vision I had for us. I had imagined a future with her. Marriage, kids, careers, everything. But now all of that seemed like a distant dream that wasn't meant to be. The condo was the first thing I took care of. I ended up putting it back on the market just as I'd planned. It didn't make sense to keep holding on to it, not when it felt like the foundation of everything that went wrong. I found a new place. Something smaller, simpler. I didn't want the weight of the past lingering over me anymore. As soon as I moved in, I felt a shift. It was like I was reclaiming my life, one small piece at a time. Work helped too. The job was demanding, but it was a welcome distraction. I threw myself into projects, focused on making connections, and growing my network. I started to see the value of my own ambition in a way I hadn't before. I wasn't just the guy who had made it big and had to support everyone else. I was my own person with my own goals, and I was more determined than ever to succeed. Not for anyone else, but for me. I won't lie. There were moments when I thought about Emma, moments when I remembered the way she used to be, the things we used to talk about, the dreams we had. And yeah, it hurt. But then I reminded myself why I ended things. It wasn't just about her being different. It was about me realizing that I had to be true to myself. I had to stop living for someone else's dreams and start living for my own. I kept myself busy, focused on self-improvement. I got back into hobbies I'd neglected while I was with Emma, working out, reading, even picking up new skills. It felt good to feel like I was finally in control of my life again. I wasn't constantly waiting for someone else's approval or wondering if they were happy with the choices I was making. For the first time in a long time, I was living for myself. As for Emma, I haven't heard from her much since that last conversation. A few texts here and there, but nothing serious. I know she's been trying to rebuild her life too, and I honestly hope she finds her way. I don't hate her. I don't even feel angry anymore. But I've accepted that we were just two people who grew in different directions, and sometimes that's all there is to it. Her sister reached out a few weeks ago, just to check in. She wanted to know how I was doing and if I was okay. It was a bit awkward at first, but I appreciated the gesture. I told her I was fine and that I was moving on. There's no need for bad blood. We just didn't work out. And that's okay. People change, relationships change, and sometimes they end. I've started dating again, though I'm not rushing into anything serious. I'm taking it slow, just enjoying getting to know new people. I'm not looking to replace Emma or find someone to fill the void. I'm just looking for someone who complements my life, someone who shares similar values and ambitions. I'm not sure if I'm ready for another long-term commitment just yet, but I'm open to the possibility. For now, I'm focused on finding the right person, not for my past, but for my future. I've learned a lot about myself through all this. I've learned that my happiness doesn't depend on anyone else. I've learned that sometimes, even when you want something to work, you have to walk away because it's not healthy for either person. I've learned that success is about more than just money or status. It's about finding fulfillment, peace, and someone who shares your vision for the future. I'm not where I thought I would be 7 years ago when I first met Emma, but that's okay. Life doesn't always turn out the way we expect, and that's the beauty of it. You can't control everything, but you can control how you respond. And I'm choosing to respond by focusing on myself, my career, and what I want in the future. No more second guessing, no more holding on to relationships that aren't serving me. I'm moving on. And while it's been one of the hardest things I've ever done, I know it's the right thing. I've learned that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is to let go of something you love. Not because you don't care, but because you love yourself more. And that's what I'm doing now, loving myself, focusing on my future, and embracing whatever comes next.